1985. The fastest growing technology company in the world, Apple, and the man who built it, was fired from his own company. One meeting, one decision, and in a single day, Steve Jobs didn't just lose his position. He lost the identity he had spent years building. Strange, isn't it? We spend our lives believing that success is what shapes us. But sometimes, life shapes us by taking success away. And maybe that's why this isn't just Steve Jobs' story. It's the story of anyone who has ever lost something and then slowly realized they had lost themselves too. 1955, San Francisco. A baby boy is born. A few days later, he is placed for adoption. His name was Steve Jobs. From the outside, he looked like any other child. But deep inside, perhaps a question had already begun to grow. Why wasn't I enough? Some questions from childhood never really disappear. They simply become part of who we are. And without realizing it, we spend our entire lives trying to answer questions we never chose to carry. Steve enrolled in college. A few months later, he dropped out. People called it a mistake. But life has a strange way of working. It rarely follows public opinion. It follows purpose. A small garage, two young dreamers, a handful of electronic parts, and an idea almost nobody believed in. That tiny garage became the birthplace of Apple. Within a few years, the young man everyone doubted was changing the future of technology. But success has a hidden price. If you're not careful, it slowly becomes your identity. And that's where the real danger begins. For Steve, Apple was never just a company. It was his dream, his life's work, his purpose. Eventually, it became the answer to one simple question: who am I? And when your entire identity is tied to one thing, losing that thing can feel like losing yourself. Then came 1985. The company he had built showed him the exit. Years later, Steve admitted, "It was devastating." This wasn't simply a business failure. It was the collapse of identity. Time passed. Steve refused to disappear. Instead of chasing what he had lost, he started building again. A new company, a new team, a new beginning. No headlines, no standing ovations, no spotlight, just quiet work, done by a man who had nothing left to prove. And sometimes, that's exactly where the best work begins. Years later, Apple did something no one expected. The company that had once pushed him out invited him back. But the man who returned wasn't the same man who had left. Before, he believed success made people valuable. Now, he understood that failure could make them wiser. Before, he wanted to build great products. Now, he wanted to build something that would outlive him. Sometimes, IFA gives you back what it once took away, but not before. It transforms the person receiving it. Steve returned to Apple, and then came the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, one breakthrough after another. The world celebrated the comeback, but almost no one saw the lonely nights, the self-doubt, or the pain that shaped the man behind those products. That's the strange thing about success. People admire the victory. They rarely see the battles. Then came 2003, a hospital room, a doctor, a diagnosis, silence. Steve Jobs was told he had cancer. In an instant, everything changed. Deadlines, meetings, business plans, none of them felt as important anymore. Because the moment we truly face our mortality, we begin to see life differently, not through ambition, but through clarity. A few years later, standing before thousands of graduates at Stanford University, Steve shared a sentence that would echo around the world. "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." Most of us live as if we have unlimited tomorrows. We postpone our dreams, We postpone difficult conversations. We postpone forgiveness. We postpone life itself. But life has never promised that tomorrow belongs to anyone. Steve also said something else. That, at first, sounds simple. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. Maybe that's why the rejection that broke your heart will one day become the reason you found your purpose. Maybe the opportunity you lost saved you from a future that was never meant for you. Maybe the chapter you call failure today will become the chapter you thank God for tomorrow. Because life's pieces never make sense while you're living them. They only reveal the picture when you finally look back. Most of us pray, God, make my life easier. But sometimes, God doesn't make the road easier. He makes you stronger. And once you've changed, the very road that once terrified you no longer feels impossible. The road didn't change. You did. If a door has closed in your life, don't rush to call it the end, because you cannot judge an entire story by a single chapter. Sometimes, what feels like an ending is simply life turning the page. Sometimes, we spend years trying to write the story of our lives. Then one day, life takes the pen and rewrites the entire chapter. In that moment, it feels like everything is falling apart. But maybe that's exactly where the real story begins. 2011. The world woke up to the news. Steve Jobs was gone. Millions remembered him as a visionary, an innovator, a genius. But if his entire life could be distilled into a single truth, perhaps it would be this. Every time life broke him, he allowed it to build someone wiser. Maybe that's the difference between people who become bitter and people who become stronger. It isn't the amount of pain they experience. It's the meaning they give to that pain. The same storm can either become your prison or your teacher. The choice isn't always in what happens to us. It's in what we allow it to create within us. We often build our identity around what we achieve, our career, our relationships, our success, our reputation. But none of those things were ever meant to carry the weight of your identity. Because the moment they disappear, you begin to wonder who you are without them. And perhaps that's the question life was waiting for you to ask all along. Faith doesn't always begin when everything makes sense. Sometimes, faith begins when nothing does. It begins when you can only see the next step, yet choose to keep walking anyway. Not because you have all the answers, but because you trust the one who does. If a door has closed in your life, don't be too quick to believe that God has abandoned you. Sometimes, He isn't removing you from your future. He's removing you from the place where you stop growing. Because comfort has a quiet way of convincing us that we've already arrived, when in reality, we've only settled. We often pray, God, change my life. But when He begins changing us, we mistake the process for punishment. The truth is, every transformation begins with a goodbye to an old habit, an old version of yourself, an old identity that can no longer carry you where you're meant to go. So if today you look in the mirror and barely recognize the person staring back, don't panic. Maybe you haven't lost yourself. Maybe you're becoming someone you've never had the chance to be before. Because sometimes God doesn't change your destination. He changes you into the person who's finally ready to reach it. And perhaps that's the greatest mystery of life. We think we're writing our own story, but years later, when we look back, we realize the chapters we once called painful were the very chapters that gave the story its meaning. So if everything in your life feels like it's falling apart, don't lose hope. Maybe your life isn't falling apart at all. Maybe God is carefully putting together the version of you you were always meant to become.